Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi's legacy is being debated following the news of his passing yesterday morning. Buthelezi was the founder of the eNCA Freedom Party and the AmaZulu traditional prime minister. He died aged 95 after a lengthy spell in hospital. To continue the conversation, we're joined now by Professor Bheki Mngomezulu from the Nelson Mandela University, who joins us virtually from Gqeberha. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Prof. A complex history about a man who's been described in many ways, divisive, one of the words, later on in his life, uniting, a mentor, and the list of descriptions go on. You've had some time to mull over the legacy left by Buthelezi. What are some of the thoughts that have come to mind when trying to succinctly put together what impact he leaves behind?
Thank you very much for your question. Coincidentally, you are calling me when in fact I'm busy putting something together which I've been asked to put together by some of your colleagues in the media space. First of all, I must just pass my deepest condolences to the Buthelezi family, the Zulu nation, and then of course the global community at large. Let us start off by saying that the late Prince Buthelezi was a human being. The late Prince Buthelezi was not a saint. So that means that there are people who are going to look at the negative side of what he did while he was still alive, and there are those who are going to focus on the positive side. But one thing I have an issue with are people who have been silent all along, and then all of a sudden, after his passing, they've suddenly gained voice. They are now saying things they would not say while he was still alive. I have an issue with that. But having said all of that, Prince Buthelezi had many identities. We'll know him as a traditional leader. We'll know him as someone who was a Christian. We'll know him as someone who was a politician, and many other identities. So then anyone who wants to talk about his legacy will pick up certain aspects of his life, and there is no way that you can put together I mean, in a short space of time, the life that spans from 1928 up to 2023. But from where I'm standing, one thing I take from him is that he stood by his word. Whenever he believed in something, no matter how good or bad it was, he would carry it through. Some leaders don't have those credentials. Today, they want to sing the song. Tomorrow, they sing that song. With Buthelezi, you got what you saw. If he was not happy with you, he didn't mince his words. He would just say that and then show it by action. So that is one thing I take from him. Of course, those who were closest to him, especially those who were in the IFP, will tell you that he is one person who was disciplined. I met him on several occasions. I remember in 2007 when we happened to be at a conference together, a conference on traditional leadership, and then I happened to be in the same commission with him. The kind of respect he showed me, young as I was then, in fact, it left an indelible footprint in me in the sense that all the things that had been said about him, all the things that he might have done, of course, they all disappeared when I looked at the respect that he showed. And then, of course, there have been instances also where we disagreed on certain issues, like it happened in 2019. But one thing I liked about him, even in 2019, when we didn't seem to find each other, is that eventually we agreed on what the issues were and forgot about personalities. And then lastly, you recall that when in fact the EFF joined Parliament and there was too much commotion in Parliament, he was one person who was level-headed, who would say that you can disagree with someone, but still do that showing respect. That is basically one thing I respect him for, and those are some of the things I will remember him for.
Prof, let's look at his political roots and how that influenced his career as a rather political animal, I suppose, or one of the ways of describing him throughout the decades that he was both involved in a movement, in a political party, and indeed in office as well. And those roots very much are in the African National Congress. He was a member of the ANC Youth League before becoming a founder of the eNCA Freedom Movement, I think it was called at the time. What kind of impact did that have on his political belief system?
Yeah, absolutely right. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi joined the ANC Youth League in 1949 when he was studying at Fort Hare, having joined the university in 1948. And he kept saying that he was taught by the likes of Z.K. Matthews, the person credited, in fact, even for the formation of the Freedom Charter, or the drafting of the Freedom Charter, and many other documents. So he started from that time, and until his passing, he regretted the fact that that chapter was not concluded, because even when he formed iNCA Nkululeko Yesizwe in 1975, he didn't just he didn't go to bed, woke up the following day, and then form the organization. There was a consultation that happened between him and the leadership of the ANC. In fact, he got the blessings of the likes of Oliver Tambo, the likes of Sisulu, and many others, that he must form an organization that was going to replace the ANC, which had been banned following the commotion that happened in 1959 with the split of the PAC, and then subsequently both the PAC and the ANC were banned. So there was no political movement in the country, and then there was an agreement that Buthelezi must form iNCA Nkululeko Yesizwe. And the reason why it was called iNCA Nkululeko Yesizwe is because King Dinizulu had formed iNkatha Zulu. So then when he formed this organization, the idea was that he was not forming a political party so that the apartheid government would not raise its eyebrows. He was just starting a cultural movement. That is how iNkatha started. And some members of the ANC, by the way, joined iNkatha because they were joining the ANC in disguise. Of course, that relationship went all the way until the last meeting in 1979, which was held in London, where Mangosuthu Buthelezi led a 17-member delegation. After that, there was no further meeting until the 1990s, when we were preparing for the new political dispensation. So people then who are of the view that Buthelezi had nothing to do with the ANC and hated the ANC, I think they are doing that out of ignorance. If you understand the history of the ANC, the history of iNkatha, and the history of relations between Buthelezi and the ANC, you'd know why he kept on saying that his wish was that before he passes on, that chapter must be concluded, because he still considered himself a member of the ANC, because he said he never resigned from the ANC. Of course, I think the IFP and the ANC will have to debate that issue now that he's gone, and then see how they bring closure.
Speaking of chapters, a chapter that can only really be described as rather dark and violent would be Mangosuthu Buthelezi's role in the transition to democracy. So we're talking late 80s, early 90s, and it's something that, again, has come up time and time again now as his legacy has been discussed over the last 24 hours or so. How do you think history will judge the role that he played in what is, I suppose, being called black-on-black violence, I suppose is the phrase that's been used in the media to describe that rather bloody time in our history. And then also his reticence to immediately join the ballot list that went out for that first democratic elections. How do you think history will judge him in terms of his role during that time?
It will depend on who the author is. We normally say history is not just a regurgitation of facts, but it's about the interpretation of facts. How you interpret those facts will then determine what the end result will be. So those who would be determined to portray him in a negative light will definitely find examples to substantiate that view. Similarly, those who want to portray him in a positive light will find more than enough evidence to support that view. For example, there are people who talk about the self-defense unit, which protected the ANC and the UDF, but then they will also talk about the self-protection unit, which was trained in the 1990s, 1993, 1994, at the Mlaba camp, which then is said to be responsible for the death of many ANC and UDF members. So in other words, if you want to focus on the SDU, and then we are going to push that narrative. But if you want to focus on the SPUs, we are going to push that narrative. So that is why I'm saying that the history that is going to be produced, or the histories that are going to be produced, will be determined on who the authors are, what facts they're using, and how they're interpreting those facts. Because the so-called black-on-black violence that you alluded to in the 1990s, there are people who will tell you that Buthelezi is to blame for that. But then there are others who are going to tell you that, no, the ANC is to blame for that. And others are going to say, by the way, it's the third force that is to blame for this. I remember when I was in KwaZulu-Natal, at one point we woke up in the morning to be told that there'd been a number of deaths that were committed And then when they were checking the bodies, they found that in some instances, some white folks had painted themselves black, and then they claimed to be either on the side of the ANC or on the side of the IFP. So the 1990s violence, in fact, was not a simple matter of a fight between the ANC and the IFP, as people would like to believe. It was a combination of factors. There are ANC and UDF members who were killed by the IFP. There are also ANC members, there are also IFP members who were killed by the ANC, but also there are people from both sides who were killed by the apartheid government because they wanted to prolong the apartheid regime for as long as necessary, and then they pitted the ANC and the IFP against each other. It's a complex situation than people want to believe.
Indeed, and something that's going to keep people talking for quite some time. Thank you so much for your time and your insight this afternoon, or this morning, rather. Professor Bheki Mngomezulu from the Nelson Mandela University joining us virtually this morning from Gqeberha.